For our research, we wanted to figure out if older mediums will die out and will streaming services be the reason they do. We came up with questions in regards to how many people own streaming services and how much they watch the content there. We also wanted to know the demographics on how many male and females watch the content and how old they are to determine what age and gender spends the most time. With that information, we wanted to know if the popularity of streaming platforms will kill older mediums and be the main medium to watch content and how this may affect in the current or future.
What we need to be informed about is the transition into more of a streaming lifestyle and how it will ultimately affect those older forms of media consumption. As a group, our goal is to solve and find out the lasting effects of this transition. As technology advances, we see shifts in our social, mental, and technological lifestyles as cycles of older technology tend to fade over time. The central aspects of our research is to see how we will further take our advancements to that next level. We feel the responsibility to conduct this research and provide knowledge because it will help those companies, whether it's older forms of streaming services or the new wave, because they will learn what they can do to provide the best experiences to users, because the main driver in this is the customer satisfaction. TV, cable, and radio can see what they can do to up their game, whether it is to have better selections of program offerings, better pricings, or overall change the experience of their product to captivate attention. We are here to provide results and show companies what modifications they should commit to, because there are so many minor flaws that can be improved and in return benefit from it. We see the current transition, but we must pave the way for future generations to have the best entertainment in the world, but with fair competition so that everyone can get a piece of the fun.
For our research process, we are trying to gather information on how many people from the ages 18 to 33 plus often use streaming services and what streaming services they use to better determine what are the popular streaming services. Having that information will help us get an idea if these popular streaming services will still be amongst the top in the future, or will there be different alternatives that will take over and become the new way of streaming or gathering entertainment. We ended up using Qualtrics to help gather that information. We are hoping that the results will give us mixed opinions about the future of streaming services and ask us if they will continue being the kings of receiving content.
Moving on to research questions. Question number 1. Which platform will have the longest existence of service and for what reasons? So for example, what ultimately determines the survival of a streaming platform? Because we see so many different forms of revenue streams, such as commercials, subscriptions, contracts, and deals with well-known Hollywood actors. So we want to know what can ultimately jeopardize the survival of streaming services, because we did recently see that the price increase of Netflix lost them 200,000 subscriptions. Now, question number 2, what factors ultimately affect streaming subscriptions? And this can help companies combat the problems and find ways to make revenue, but at the same time please and satisfy customers, because that is the main driver to their success. And last but not least, we wanted to know the lasting effects of major streaming companies as they compete with each other for subscriptions and how it ultimately affects older services. So what we mean by this is, will streaming services one day wipe out the existence of older forms of media? But to be honest, we do not think radio or cable will go anywhere, because they are doing absolutely fine, because they made a good allocated money with the commercials and subscriptions. Moving on to our data analysis. 46% consisted of men and 54% consisted of females. From 18 to 21, which that consisted of 18.37%. Ages from 22 to 26, it consisted of 30.61%. The ages 27 to 32, it consisted of 20.41%. And the ages 33 and plus consisted of 30.61%. From our data, we can see the differences in demographics when it comes to the age, genders, what platforms they use, and how the ease of use affects all everyday users. In terms of our age ranges, we can start to analyze what type of content people like to watch. as most ages prefer to use Netflix, Disney Plus, and HBO Max as their content of choice, especially when they spend 1 to 5 hours per watching session. It creates new possibilities for understanding their audience characteristics, as most people from the ages 18 and plus can mostly agree on the shifting status of where we consume most of our content, while people at the ages of 33 and plus can mostly understand the power cable influences of its time and how we now receive our information.
Based on our data from Qualtrics, we have predicted that most of the users that own streaming services use the top 3: Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. Most of the viewers are young between the ages of 18 to 30. Our group confidently predicted this because this is a new type of entertainment that was recently introduced and highly popularized due to its conveniences of having access to content from home. Out of the many streaming platforms, we knew that Netflix was the one that was going to be the most watched because of the variety of genres and content that it offered was way bigger and more successful than their competitors. Our data shows that people spent about 2 hours plus looking at their content. We also predicted that over time, streaming would not completely die out, but will diminish because of the increase of price and the monthly pay that will make viewers switch back to older mediums and potentially whatever is created in the future. This will likely make streaming platforms compete with older mediums to make it even more affordable. Even by then, it might not appeal to viewers because the content may not be as good. What we got wrong. Surprisingly, we did not expect older viewers, 30 plus, to watch streaming platforms as much compared to the younger viewers. In our data, it is shown that they watch about 2 to 5 hours of content daily. We thought that it will range between 1 or 2 hours due to them being accustomed to older mediums like cable and TV and wouldn't want to invest in many platforms due to them to wanting to transition to something that may ruin the tradition of being old school. But because many of their favorite shows are beginning to transition into exclusives, they're likely forced to pay for the monthly subscription. Most older viewers find paying monthly to be very obnoxious because before they had access to that content for free and question why they have to pay now for what used to be free content. Another thing that surprised us was that a big portion of our viewers were female. We believe that because most women are big fans of drama, comedy, and romance, which there's a huge library from in many streaming platforms that are out there. In terms of male viewers, we feel it's about having YouTube to be the main source that captures most of the attention that subtracts from the other streaming platforms due to the popularity of video game tutorials and walkthroughs that are not present there.
Now we will relate back to our hypothesis and main topic. From our research, we can now relate back to our main question and how our main topic is now relevant to our data. In terms of the growing rise of all these different streaming platforms, we can see the shifts of people from a linear source of information to a digital world, where the consumer now has the control to pay for what they want. The shifting structure of where the money is mostly made is seen through the revolution of technology and how media is now consumed by people. No longer by paper, no longer radio, and somewhat cable, as the world is now learning all online. The systems of this competition has brought positive and negative effects to the streaming industry because the ever-changing consumers now have the control of what they want to choose to subscribe to on a monthly basis and what media they want to see. From the earlier days of the 90s, we saw the power of cable and its singular platform of what news they can control. It can mostly be one-sided if someone only had access to a couple of channels back then. With the power of getting information by a couple of clicks now, using social media platforms, the process of receiving new information has sped up tremendously. Therefore, we can say the shifting consumption of media is now mostly digital, and how this can be an effect to cable in the long run. We will now talk about the potential effects to cable and the shifting platform to streaming. The position of cable and how it makes viewers feel is something also to be considered. people mostly understood what they watched just by their limited sources of newspapers, cable channels, and older forms of radio broadcasting. These emotional aspects should be considered in understanding how people liked how they got their information and how they saw it. If it's just easily turning on a television, choosing a channel, and just listening to what information is in front of them. Nowadays, people tend to choose what they get to see, what they get influenced by, and by the mass amounts of platforms that they get to choose from. As we see an increase in digital users today, we understand the effects it has on cable, radio, newspapers, and even theaters too. As people did enjoy theaters and having that full connected experience of a blockbuster movie. With the COVID protocols and the virus shutting down mostly everything, pressurizing a safety aspect that essentially didn't benefit most theaters due to the fear of the virus spreading. Some people even feel that theaters are not of their choice anymore due to the ease of use, compatibility, and power an application has in terms of content consumption. Now we can talk about how it can affect our future and how the potential change in our own media consumption. In hopes of the future, it's something we can't guess or see when it comes to the possibilities of cable adapting to the revolutions of technology. But with this data we have, we can make guesses towards understanding the trends and possibilities of the future companies that will form our media consumption. The power of a platform can ultimately affect the way someone may think or even influence them. As a group, we believe that cable will still last for a while, as there are many channels and older platforms that are still keeping up. As you can see, most cable companies are essentially just jumping ship to many other streaming platforms, as we can see the adaptations in order to be of use to people. With radio broadcasts, we can see the potential dying out. As technology starts to produce higher forms of content consumption, that it won't be a platform for many people to use and listeners starting to decrease. The power of the streaming industry plays a big role in understanding the effects of how distribution has brought artists to its audience, as the production of new potential films and shows have surpassed new levels since the lockdown. We can see the potential of streaming platforms and how much they benefit many workers, artists, and executives.